Hello everybody, this is A.L. Levy with URM Academy, and this is the Metal Mix Hall of Fame, which is where I deconstruct some of the most important songs in metal from a songwriting, arrangement, and mixing perspective, with the goal of giving you guys actionable takeaways that will help you level up your next song. Now, this is the start of an ongoing series, so if you'd like me to cover a song, if you have any requests, if I agree with you that it should be in the Metal Mix Hall of Fame, I will gladly do it. So please leave requests in the comments below, and also give me your thoughts on what I had to say about this. So we're going to start with a song by Dimmu Borgir, the Norwegian black metal band. This is taken from their Cult Armageddon record. The song is called Vredesbyrd, and look, I know I probably can't pronounce that right, but I tried. I went to a site that helps you with pronunciations, and I typed it in, and I just cannot do the Norwegian, so I'm sorry. Anyways, this is off of Dimmu Borgir's sixth album. It was released in 2003. This album sold over 100,000 units in the US alone, which is the first record on Nuclear Blast to ever do that, which is pretty monumental. And I remember when this happened, it was like, wow, a black metal band sold that many records? What is going on? But yeah, it debuted on the Billboard 200 chart. And you got to remember, this is back when record sales mattered a lot more. Most of the orchestral parts were performed by the Prague Philharmonic, so there's a real orchestra on this. I believe it's a 65-piece. The first single off the album was Progenies of the Great Apocalypse, which is another cool track. And this was produced and mixed by none other than Fredrik Nordström, with assistance by Shagrath. And I know that someone that we've had on Nail the Mix, Mr. Henrik Oud, was an assistant engineer, I believe, on this. So lots of great people on it. Let's get into the song. Basically, Vredesbyrd translates to Wrath's Burden, or Burden of Wrath in English, and it's the second single off the album. It also appeared on the soundtrack, the 2005 movie Alone in the Dark. And before I go on, let me just say that you shouldn't listen to this mix with modern ears. You should listen to it purely as a musical listener. I know that may be hard to do, but bear with me and at least try. There are elements to this mix that might have gone down differently if they were done nowadays, but that doesn't change how brilliant this is as a mix and how groundbreaking it was. So what makes it so great? Well, there's a bunch of mix elements I'm going to cover, such as automation and balance. And I mean, this mix is an automation masterpiece. But first, let me get down to some of the most fundamental elements that make this even enjoyable to listen to in the first place. First of all, it's in Norwegian. I'm going to play it for a second. You'll notice right away that you can't understand the vocals unless you are Norwegian. It sounds aggressive, it sounds cool, it sounds evil, like all the stuff you would want in a badass metal vocal, but it's not in English, so I don't really understand what he's saying, but I'm getting the feel of what he's saying, and I think that's super effective. Personally, I kind of hate English for this style of music. All right, hate might be a strong word, but I definitely do think that being able to understand the lyrics can take away from the feeling of the lyrics. The first time I noticed that I felt this way was, God rest his soul, the great Robert Shaw, who was an orchestral conductor in Atlanta, who specialized in choir works. And he would take great requiems like the Brahms Requiem or Mozart's Requiem, and he would translate them into English. And I'd go and hear these pieces that are just like epic and gorgeous, and I'm used to them in German or Italian or something, which I don't understand. And then hearing them in English, and it just like took the wind out of my sails for the pieces. English, in my opinion, doesn't really work. Maybe it's a familiarity thing, but anyhow, I think for this big epic operatic stuff, especially in orchestral music, non-English is a great way to go. And the Norwegian just gives the vocals a seriousness that you can't get with English. I mean, let me let you hear that again and just like think about the way that these words are enunciated and pronounced. Just
Forbannet jordens mörtens röst. På stånd kring
I have no idea what he's saying, but it does sound like he means it, and I think it's cool. And in English, some of these types of vocals can get real silly real fast. In Norwegian, it's a different story, but here's a perfect example. Just think back to the song Du hast by Rammstein. How much do you think it helped to not be able to understand those lyrics? I mean, obviously, if you're German, you understand them, but for everyone else who doesn't speak German, this was a worldwide metal hit. If you knew that he was just saying, you hate me, over and over and over again, it might be kind of lame, right? But the German sounds so brutal, and it's so catchy and different that people just ate it up. And I'm convinced that if it was in English, and I believe there even was an English version, it just wouldn't have been nearly as cool. It definitely would not have launched the band in America, which is kind of weird, right? Because you expect songs in English to get big in the US. So that aside, let's get into the music. So when the song comes in, you immediately get a full force arrangement. No build up, nothing. It's just vocals, orchestra, metal band from the get-go, and it wastes zero time getting to the main theme of the song. It's just there you are, there's a theme. And what's important to note is that this theme comes back with direct repetitions and really creative variations. Let me play this for you and point out what the main theme is, and then I'll keep talking about it. The main theme is characterized by the harmonic progression that the guitars are basically laying a foundation for, but it's really coming out in the brass. So everything else is just kind of adding momentum. The double bass is adding momentum. The rhythm guitars are adding momentum and a harmonic foundation, but the brass is the theme. And what's important to note is that this comes back with direct repetitions and really creative variations, but they managed to take the song through various moods by just messing with this theme. And it's not, again, the riffs or the vocals right here, though those are cool too. It's the brass. Anyhow, the first time they change it up is at approximately 24 seconds, where the vocals drop out and the guitar leads come in. Let me play that for you. And you'll see right here, this is where the change occurs. So, and I called it main theme, first variation, guitar lead version. And that's because it's basically the same music, but few changes. All right, you get the idea? So those are some tasty and catchy leads, but they follow the exact same progression as the main theme. And plus, you're getting a simplified version of the theme still being played in the background and also a lot quieter. So I just want you to listen to the difference in volume between the following elements when the transition happens. One, the brass in the main theme then gets real quiet when the guitar version comes in. And two, that the double kick is present in the main theme, but somewhat quiet when the vocals are taking place, and then they come up during the lead. So pay attention to the brass levels and the double kick levels. Notice what I mean? The reason that this works, bringing the kicks up, making them more present during the second part, is it helps to keep the momentum going when the vocals drop out and the main orchestral brass theme gets quiet. Also, the rhythm guitars come up. Check that out. Yeah, and these are subtle volume changes. I mean, those of you who are newer at mixing or haven't mixed at all may not hear what I'm talking about. But if you really zero in on that, like really try to focus on those guitars in your mind, you'll notice that when it gets to this part, it's like a bump up in volume. Just check it out again. It makes a big difference. Those vocals and brass from the main theme at the beginning add so much momentum that to just have them drop out without making up for the loss would make you feel like you just hit a wall when driving really, really fast. And then, what's this at 44 seconds? Check it out. It's a fucking awesome fill. You notice how loud it is and how quiet everything else suddenly got? I mean, we have another fill in the song that happens before it. Check it out. Okay, you heard how loud that is? How about this one? That second fill is considerably louder. And if you've ever tried mixing this style of music, you know that the toms will get buried very easily. So this is a deliberate move, and it works great because it's a very well-placed way to transition back to the main theme. It takes you back there nicely. Now, when you go back to the main theme, keep in mind, just pay attention to how the rhythm guitars are no longer winning the volume wars because the vocals are back and the orchestral brass theme is back. So pay attention to the rhythm guitar levels. Look, you can't have everything at the lead or it would sound like a mess. So you got to be very strategic in what gets the foreground, middle ground, and background, and when. So, there's a part later that we'll get to where the rhythm guitar gets the total foreground. But in these earlier sections, it's kind of dancing between middle ground and background almost, which is fine. I mean, it's still there. It's still driving the song. But if you had the rhythm guitar as loud as the orchestra, it would muddy up the main theme, and you won't get that stuck in your head. So something else I want to point out is that just to keep it from being an identical and like a lame copy-paste, please pay attention to how the rhythm guitar riff is slightly varied when the theme returns. It's hitting more of the thematic and melodic elements than just being a straight 16th note metal rhythm guitar bed. So, all right, I'll play you the first time it goes and just pay attention to how the rhythm guitar is just playing straight 16ths. And then when it comes back in, so it's very similar and same vibe and everything, but it's a slight variation which keeps shit from getting old. You know what I'm saying? All right, let's move on. This right here is one of my favorite transitions in all of metal ever. The riff and the feel and the drum beat are just so evil and validating. But what's even cooler is that this isn't a new part. The guitar riff that's chunky and heavy is just a variation on that main brass theme. Let me play it for you, and we'll get into it. So I'll play it through halfway through the second time of the main theme, going into what I think is one of the coolest parts of all time. Okay, that part is so cool. All right, listen to the riff, the rhythm guitar riff. How it's structured, not even what notes it's playing or the intricacies, but how it's structured, and then listen to the brass. holds longer notes in similar types of places as the main theme does. There is a contour to it, which is a variation off of the main theme. This is not just some random riff coming out of nowhere. And I need to point that out because so many extreme metal bands just write riff salad that's just riff after riff after riff after riff that are not based on each other and don't compositionally work. And I mean, sometimes you get lucky and, you know, it's just like winning the lottery. Sometimes random shit comes together to work. Sometimes these extreme metal songs will come together with a bunch of parts that have nothing to do with each other. But in general, it's garbage. And if you really analyze what some of the better and great bands are doing, they use theme and variation everywhere. Let's also keep in mind that this is a very different mix than what came before it. There are way different priorities now in the foreground, middle ground, and background. The cymbals, the hats, the toms, and the rhythm guitar are the forefront. I mean, along with the vocals, of course. But the orchestra is now more of a vibe setter than a lead element. And that's important because you really need to be able to hear that hi-hat line. It's so important, as well as these toms. I mean, these are the lead instruments. So listen again, play from a little bit before it, and just pay attention to those cymbals, that cymbal work. Notice why the cymbals had to be highlighted here, why they had to be brought out. And notice how much attention is giving to that tom fill right there. Like, you really can hear all the articulations and space and room on those toms. Like, it's meant to be epic. And that, like, I mean, the cymbals are present throughout the entire mix, but they're more just filling in space and making it sound like a drum set. This is the first time where a cymbal is kind of defining the part. Also, the China work is great. That's where the Chinas come in. So I notice there's a small change when the tom parts come in. The guitars are no longer driving it. It's the toms, the Chinas, and the orchestra. And the guitar that's holding out the octaves is now the supporting role. And I'm pointing this out because we're still in the same part of the song. It's not like we went from a verse to a chorus or something like that, or some abrupt transition. We're in the same riff, in the same part, but still the priorities in the arrangement and mix change in order to allow the song's momentum to continue. Had the guitar stayed up and the main priority, it may have muddled up the toms and orchestra, which should be the focal point. And also, how fucking cool do these toms sound? I'm going to play it through halfway through this the halftime evil theme, and then just pay attention to when the tom section comes in, or the rhythm guitars come down a little and the orchestra comes up. Just pay attention to that. And those toms really set it up for when the when it comes back, but with vocals, and the guitars come back up, and it's even heavier. That bringing those guitars down and making the orchestra louder during that tom part, it makes it more like a moment of tension almost before it really slams in. And if they had just come in with the vocals right away on this main theme variation, it wouldn't have. I don't think it would hit quite as hard as when they after the tom part. So check it out. Oh, and back to the first thing I talked about, the Norwegian. The coolness of it being in Norwegian is most evident to me in this part because, you know, there's less going on. It's less fast, and so you can zone in on more individual elements, and you can really tell that you can't understand what the fuck he's saying, but it's just so cool. All right, now that may seem like an abrupt transition, and it kind of is, but I think that's the point, and that's what's great about it. So if you notice, the song at the beginning starts very upbeat and really hammers home the main theme, but before you can even get used to it, it goes to the halftime version. I'll remind you what that is. So the main theme. Okay, you know, before that can even get boring, like under 1 minute, 10 seconds, you're into the halftime part. But before you can even really get used to that, because, you know, if it went on too long, it would also get boring. As cool as that part is, if you do it too long, it's going to get boring. So before it can even get there, before you can even start thinking about, oh, this is going on too long, fucking energy pickup, right? And this section also is kind of a tension builder. It adds tension via them hanging on a note, the sudden prioritization of the snare. If you notice, the snare up till now in the song has not been like, you know, it's been doing traditional like 2 and 4 and, you know, being a part of the drum set, but it hasn't been a lead drum like the fills or something. Suddenly the snare is now prioritized. There's a perceived tempo bump. Another thing to pay attention to is the guitars are now at the loudest they've been in the entire song. They're not the loudest they're gonna be because they're setting that up. But keep in mind now that all the orchestra is doing is sustaining tension while the guitar is setting us up for the riff, which happens next. So I want you to pay attention to the rhythm guitar levels, and we're going to go into the riff, and then we'll talk about the riff. So through the halftime part, into the tension build, into the riff, and just pay attention to how the guitars become more dominant, and then boom. Listen to it one more time. Again, pay attention to what's happening with the guitars and also what's happening to the orchestra. All right, so now the rhythm guitars are at their loudest, most dominant point in the song. And the traditional elements of a badass metal mix are in play. You've got the double bass, like you've got the momentum, you've got the distorted bass, you have the heavy-ass guitars, like it's in your face now. And the fact that you don't get to hear the band like this until basically 2 minutes in makes this riff, that much more powerful. And it's such a change up that you can't help but laugh at how sick it is. And one thing to keep in mind is that music like this doesn't typically rely on choruses to stick in people's heads, but instead, most of these non-traditional structure bands that experience success use the riff or the part, that's what I call it, which is the one main event in the song that makes it all come together. Like, it all builds to this point, and you're going to remember it. And there's other badass stuff that happens, but like, there's just this one catchy fucking part that just, makes the audience erupt. Like, that would be this part. This is what every band that doesn't follow traditional structures uses. At some point in their songs, if they're good, there's going to be the riff. It's usually only one. One riff's all you need. To top it off, they put this ping-pong vocal delay effect that leads the riff off, and is so perfectly placed, because this is one of these things that I hear in amateur mixes all the time, is these vocal effects that people add all over the place where they don't belong. They don't think about how they work in the overall dynamic of the song. They just are like, I know how to make a cool effect, and I'm just going to put it here. But in this mix, they chose the one spot to use that effect where it would have maximum impact, and it works. Listen to the vocal delay when it comes into the riff. That's the perfect use of that technique. All right, now another thing that's very craftily done is the vocal treatment. It's almost lo-fi compared to the rest of the song, and it helps both artistically and sonically. Artistically, it just sounds creepy and cool, but sonically, throwing that right there with that treatment helps the riff stay the riff. Nothing is getting in its way. So pay attention to that. When the vocals come in, just notice it's a different EQ. It's not a very broad range of frequencies in those vocals. It's quite lo-fi, and that helps the riff keep its size. All right, so it goes on with that a little longer, and we get to this. Let you hear it again. That's another use of a sick fill to transition us to the second variation of the main theme, or what you could call the evil halftime part. Remember how I pointed out earlier at about 44 seconds how there was a fill that got us back to the first variation of the main theme? They're using loud fills and space throughout the song to help us get back to parts that might be similar to something else, but are a little bit different. But they change up the approach every single time. This time, instead of it just being a loud fill over the band drops out and all you hear are drums. Moves like that will let you bring similar ideas back multiple times without them getting boring. If every single time they wanted to have a badass fill leading us into the next part, they dropped out the band and just let you hear the fill, it would be like, all right, guys, enough's enough. It's like when you're in that local band and the guy who has way too much gear buys the whammy pedal, and then suddenly he needs to put whammy pedal in every single riff of every single song, and it's really fucking annoying. It's better to take similar ideas and vary them throughout the song, or take one awesome thing like that vocal delay that we mentioned at the beginning of the riff and use it in that one spot where it's just going to be like an atom bomb going off. And I'll just say that this is how you do it right. This is how you keep from sounding samey, repetitive, dull, redundant. So another thing to point out is that they didn't stay on the riff long enough for it to get old. That's another common theme in this song, is that nothing sticks around long enough for you to get bored. So I'll let you hear the build up to the riff, and then into the fill, and then back to the evil halftime part. And just notice that you don't have enough time to get bored. You have enough time to get into it, for the crowd to get moving, for it to be cool, and then it's over. We're back to that, that super cool halftime part. It goes on a little bit. I'll let you hear what's next because I have some words about that part. So here we are again, another seemingly abrupt transition, but in my opinion, it's really not. If you listen closely to the orchestra, they're just playing another variation of the main theme. Plus, the first time there was an abrupt transition, right here before the riff, they did something very, very similar. They had a very snare-dominant drum line to help us get to the next part. Same thing here. The snare is used to set up what's coming next. Now keep in mind, they have two snare-based transitions, but they're not the same thing. They didn't just say, okay, we got to get to the next part, just copy-paste that snare transition. It's a totally different feel. It's a totally different approach in the mix. It's just different, and that's why it works, and it's not boring. Another thing to note is that here the guitar riffs are less interesting. It becomes a lot more about that haunted choir, strings, and creepy vocal effect type vibe that's going on. And right here, the vocal effects are basically the loudest they've ever been in the song. And with the exception of the one delay effect over the riff earlier, I'm talking about, your regular reverbs and delays that are on the vocals through the entire song. This is the loudest there'll be in the entire song. And that really sets the vibe. Just pay attention to how much quieter the rhythm guitar is, how much louder the choirs and reverbs get, and then as it develops, as it gets to about 3:35, the orchestra really starts to take over and turn it into full soundtrack mode. So pay attention. You hear those reverbs just swimming all over the place, and that haunted choir, and how the guitar is no longer, listen to it on the riff. It's like all guitar. Right there, it still has heavy guitar, but it's not nearly as dominant. There is, like I said, it's all about the creep. Right here, this is where the orchestra really starts to take over. And I'll let you hear it in a second, but like I said, it goes into full soundtrack mode. And please note that while the rest of the song does have the orchestra in it, and it's a very important part of the song, it gives you the main theme, it's never this developed. They waited till about 3 minutes 20, 3 minutes 30 to give you the full scope orchestral experience. All right? This is the first time that it's really you're watching fucking Star Wars or something. And notice as that orchestral theme builds, how unimportant having the rhythm guitars loud becomes. Like the rhythm guitars get quieter and quieter and quieter as these orchestral elements build and build and build. In keeping with the structure of the rest of the song, they build and build and build and build this orchestral part that's amazing. And before it can get boring, boom, right back to the opening theme of the song to carry us out till the end. But they don't just use a boring transition. They use something that they started to hint at earlier, which is the use of space and toms. But this time, they pause. The whole band stops, even the drums. So it lets this basically non-stop locomotive of a song have a brief breath before hitting us with the big main idea. I mean, this is masterful shit. So anyways, I could go on and dissect every moment of the song, but I think you get the idea. The main takeaways I want to leave you guys with are, number one, make intentioned and strategic decisions when deciding which elements will be your foreground, middle ground, and background elements. Number two, no matter what happens in the arrangement, always keep the momentum going. And number three, a cool trick done once at the exact right moment is infinitely more powerful than nonstop ear candy that doesn't bring the feeling of the song or the mix out. So if you enjoyed this video and you want more great content from URM, please like and subscribe, and make sure you hit that bell button next to the subscribe so you get notified of new videos. Like I said at the beginning, this is the start of an ongoing series. I would love to get your suggestions for what songs to cover. If I agree with you that they should be in the Metal Mix Hall of Fame, then I will cover them. If I don't agree, then I won't. And if we have disagreements, you can make your own Metal Mix Hall of Fame, and we'll see. Maybe you can make a strong enough case for why your pick should be in there. So stay tuned for more. Happy mixing.